Muscle tissues respond to stimuli by producing contractions. They shorten to produce movement. There are three types of muscle tissue, such as skeletal muscle. This is a voluntary muscle tissue that produces movement of the skeleton at the joints, or produces facial expressions if that muscle happens to be attached to the skin of the face. Voluntary muscle tissues are those that we have conscious control over. Skeletal muscle tissue is the most common type of muscle tissue, composing approximately 40% of body mass, and they also produce body heat in addition to producing movements of the bones and the joints. The tissue itself is composed of long cylinder-shaped cells that are called fibers that have visible striations within them, in addition to many nuclei. The striations are the arrangement of protein groups in the muscle cell that are ultimately responsible for creating the contractions. The second muscle tissue is cardiac muscle, and this is an involuntary muscle tissue because we do not have conscious control over it. It is the muscle tissue that produces contractions of the heart and pumps blood. It consists of small branched muscle cells that contain visible striations. Cardiac muscle cells are joined to adjacent cardiac muscle cells by intercalated discs. These are junctions of desmosomes and gap junctions. The gap junctions allow calcium to flow from one cell to another in order to coordinate contraction of the entire heart, while the desmosomes tightly hold the adjacent cells together. And then there is smooth muscle, which is the third type of muscle tissue, and this is also an involuntary muscle tissue. It's primarily found in the walls of many digestive and urinary system organs, in addition to the pupils of the eyes, the airways of the respiratory system, some of the major arteries, in addition to the walls of the uterus. Smooth muscle consists of thin, thread-like cells that lack any visible striations. Nervous tissue is the last of the four tissue types that we will study. It is tissue that responds to a stimulus by creating an electrical signal called an action potential, and ultimately it's that action potential that causes the release of a chemical called a neurotransmitter from nervous tissue. It's the neurotransmitter then that signals other cells, tissues, and organs in order to change what that structure is doing or to alter some aspect of its maintenance of homeostasis. This tissue is primarily found in the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. It consists of two cell types. The first cell type is the neurons, which are the signal-sending cells of the nervous system that create action potentials when they are stimulated. And it's these cells that will then also release neurotransmitters in response to those action potentials being created. The action potential is a brief electrical change in the cell that's brought about by the movement of charged particles like sodium and potassium, and the action potential will then cause the release of neurotransmitters from that neuron. The second cell type are the glial cells, or the neuroglia, and these function as supporting cells in the nervous system that do not create action potentials. Instead, they perform functions that neurons are too specialized to do, such as cleaning up excess sodium and potassium in the nervous tissue, promoting formation of the barrier between the blood and the brain, or some of the glial cells wrap neurons in order to increase action potential speed.